Now that Caesar is losing support in Rome itself, he's going to have to send another one of his allies down to Rome in place of Clodius, since Clodius is dead. And that man is going to be Marcus Antonius, and we will talk about that man in a little bit. But first, Caesar also has to start having problems in Gaul itself. He can't just leave Gaul to go and deal with Rome, because that would be illegal, because you can't leave the province that you're governor of. But, more importantly, he now has the worries of this. Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix is the king of the Arverni tribe, who is a Gallic leader, okay? He's one of the leaders of the Gallic tribes. And Vercingetorix decides to start rebelling in the year 53 BCE, and he continues this rebellion until 52 BCE. And, again, he is the king of the Arverni tribe, which is one of the different Gallic tribes in Gaul, of course, France, and he rallied other Gallic tribes to fight against the Romans. And in fact, when he unites all these other tribes together, all of them decide that he is not only going to be just king of the Arverni, but he needs to have a title that's worth being leader of all of these other tribes, because he kind of unites them. And thus he becomes High King. High King. At this point, the Gauls, under Vercingetorix, start taking an idea out of the Roman playbook from years and years and years earlier during the Punic War, and that's the idea of the Fabian tactics, okay? Now, they might have not come up with it from the Romans, they might have not stolen it from the Romans directly, but it's the same idea, that they're going to destroy as much food and poison water wells, etc., throughout Gaul, so that the Romans cannot use it. And so it's basically scorched earth tactics, where they literally actually at some points burn all of the crops and fields when they're about to be picked, or they should be picked, because the Romans are going to take a lot of that food themselves. And so they decide, the Gauls under Vercingetorix decide to burn their own food to stop the Romans from being able to have it and being able to take it. Because Vercingetorix realizes the best way to defeat the Romans is to starve them out of Gaul. Okay, that the 10 legions of Gaul, or the 10 Roman legions in Gaul under Caesar, might not be able to be defeated. That they're sometimes too difficult to fight one-on-one. But if you starve them to death, they're going to have to leave. And so Vercingetorix, during this, decides to retreat to the city of Alesia, when Caesar finally builds up his army and starts attacking Vercingetorix. And so Vercingetorix retreats to the city of Alesia with 80,000 of his tribesmen, and it already has on top of that its own city's inhabitants, which is several thousand people living there already. Caesar follows Vercingetorix to Alesia and begins besieging it, or lays siege to it, in 52 BCE, at this point with 11 legions. 11 legions. It's no longer just 10, but it's now finally an 11th legion. He has just created again another new legion. And he also has 10,000 other auxiliary troops, meaning people from elsewhere, some from Spain, some from northern Italy and stuff like that, that aren't actually Roman soldier legionnaires, okay? Maybe soldiers on horseback are included in this as well, okay? But 11 legions worth, so about 55,000 men at least, closer to 60,000 men, plus an extra 10,000, so almost 70,000 men of Caesar's army against 80,000 tribesmen plus the city inhabitants. And what does the city of Alesia look like, and why did Vercingetorix retreat to there? Well, he retreated to it because the city of Alesia is this city on a very large hill, okay, with very hard rocky outcroppings around most of it, so there's only a couple places to come in and out of the city. That hill is much higher than most of the territory around it. There are no real hills anywhere near, except for like one really far off in miles away. And so it's got a very good view of the area. It also has a strong stone wall around the city of Alesia. And so the city of Alesia is very protected on this rocky hill. And Vercingetorix decides that it is best to stay inside that hill in the town, and that he would be able to have all of his food brought from elsewhere to it. And that's what they end up doing. They bring all the food from all of the places they weren't burning the food from to Alesia. so his army can stay there. Well, Caesar realizes that this is going to be a long, drawn-out battle, and he wants to besiege it, and that he's got siege equipment like catapults and big giant crossbows that fire like log-sized arrows, basically, okay? And he's got all sorts of other equipment and siege equipment to attack the city, and he tries several times, but he realizes the best way to do it is just starve the people out of the city and bring the rest of the supplies to him. And so Caesar decides to build this big giant wooden palisade, or wooden wall, about 12.86 miles long, about 14 Roman miles. There's a slight difference between our modern mile and the Roman mile. And that's this ring of wood right here, where this big giant ring of wooden palisade is built around the bottom of the hill, and Caesar's men are behind it, stopping all of the people in the city, including Vercingetorix, from ever getting out, is the plan. And so the legionnaires and Caesar have done this, and they're hoping that this large fenced wall is going to stop them from being able to get out, and eventually the people under Vercingetorix will start starving and running out of their supplies, and that they'll surrender. Or be forced to run out and attack Caesar, and then Caesar will be able to bring his army actually to fight them one-on-one, and which would be better. Well, at that point, when he is building this, Caesar finds out that other Gallic tribes, remember, because Vercingetorix wasn't just in charge of the Arverni tribe, where most of the soldiers are from here, but he also united a bunch of tribes throughout all of Gaul. And that these Gallic tribes all decide to start attacking Caesar from the outside. And so Caesar ends up realizing that he's going to be attacked, and so when he's about to get attacked, he actually builds a second wall. And so he has his camp in between the two wooden walls. So he's got his wooden wall here facing inwards with all the defenses, with the catapults facing this way. And all of his other men build another wall with all the catapults and soldiers facing outwards, so that if the Gauls attack from the outside, that they're defended, and that the Roman soldiers are all in the middle, okay? And so that's what his 11 legions do. And for months, this siege continues. Months and months. Finally, as things start winding down in September, the people under Vercingetorix in the cities do begin to start starving and running out of food. And so what Vercingetorix does is he sends the people, the regular inhabitants of the city of Alesia, down the hill to beg for mercy to Caesar, thinking that they will be forced at that point to let them in, and that then Caesar and his supplies, which are also running low at this point, will run out because they're going to be taking care of all these poor citizens of the city of Alesia in the Roman camp. Well, Caesar tells his men, do not let those people inside the walls, our wooden walls. Do not let them in their camp. Do not feed them. And so many of those people end up either dying in the middle area or going back into the city itself and dying in the city, before eventually both Vercingetorix in the city with his 80,000 remaining soldiers and other soldiers from the countryside of the rest of Gaul all decide to attack on the same day at the same place in the wall, or the same couple places in the wall, a couple different thin places in the wall. They decide to attack 2 or 3 of them at once, that they're being attacked on the outside as well as the inside. And so Caesar is forced to move all of his men to those same positions, and is actually incredibly able to defend against Vercingetorix's soldiers from the city, as well as the ones from the rest of Gaul. And when that happens, Vercingetorix and his men find out that they're not going to get break through the wooden wall, and they retreat back up here, and he basically marches down on his horse the following day, pictured here, a painting during the 1900s, 1850s to 1900s, so only about 80 years ago he died, or actually about 100 years ago he died, in the year 1926, Lionel Noel Royer, okay, which was a famous painter of the day, painted this famous painting of Vercingetorix surrendering to Julius Caesar, okay, and it is a painting right here, painted here, and it supposedly happened very similar to this. Lionel Royer actually looked up the history of the Gallic Wars and looked up the Battle of Alesia, or the Siege of Alesia. And he painted this picture very close to what should have been happening. And so supposedly Vercingetorix rode his horse into the Roman walls and was let in the Roman camp as basically a prisoner, and he surrenders directly to Caesar. And immediately with his surrender, he throws down his weapon, his sword and his big mace-like thing, and he then ends up getting off of his horse and stripping down to where he's naked, and basically saying that he's now a prisoner of Rome and of Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar is going to take him into custody and as a prisoner, and at that point, basically Gaul has now been completely defeated. Vercingetorix, as well as the people in Alesia and those ones that were attacking from the outside, were the last few tribes to fight against the Romans. The rest have completely surrendered or been subjugated or defeated. And so Caesar is now basically ruler of all of Gaul. He's now conquered all of Gaul. Well, there are still problems going on in Rome for Caesar. In the year 50 to 49 BCE, Caesar gets a lot of info from two people in Rome. One of them is, of course, Marcus Antonius, which we talked about at the beginning of this lecture video. And the other is Marcus Junius Brutus. And so let's talk about each of them. Both of them are allies of Caesar that are hanging out in Rome, writing letters back to Caesar in Gaul, while Caesar is finishing off the end of the Gauls. And so Marcus Junius Brutus was born in the year 85 BCE. He is a son of a lover of Caesar, but not Caesar's son, okay? Marcus Junius Brutus's mother had an affair with Caesar when Caesar was a late teenager to early 20s-year-olds. But beforehand, she had already given birth from a previous lover of hers, actually her former husband, to Marcus Junius Brutus. However, a lot of people get the dates wrong and the numbers wrong, and they start looking at when the fact that Caesar did know her back then and stuff, and so they kind of say, oh, well, Caesar is Marcus Junius Brutus's father, but that's not true. One interesting thing about the Marcus Junius Brutus family, though, okay, of his mother as well as his former father that died before Caesar met his mother, was an old they can actually track their patrician roots, because they're a patrician family, that can trace itself all the way back to being one of the original families that kicked out King Tarquinius Superbus. Remember Tarquinius Superbus, who was the last king of the Roman monarchy, the last Rex? He was kicked out, remember, for that whole scandal with his son sleeping with and raping the woman. And so Tarquinius Superbus was kicked out by a bunch of patrician families. Well, one of those patrician families that led that revolt against the king, Tarquinius Superbus, was Junius Brutus's great ancestor. Okay? Marcus Antonius is the other ally. Oh, and one last thing is, Junius Brutus is an optimate, but he's loyal to Caesar because of just how well his mother knew him, and that when Brutus was growing up, Caesar was kind of always sometimes around because of that, as well as just they politically became friends when Brutus wanted to join the military and join political positions. Caesar always pushed for that and always helped him out politically. Okay? Marcus Antonius. Let's talk a lot about him. Excuse me. Marcus Antonius is also known as Mark Antony, also with a C or a K for Mark Antony. He was born in the year 83 BCE. He is a plebeian tribune. Oh, sorry, not plebeian tribune. He's a tribune in the military, which is a military rank, as well as being an ally of Caesar. He also had been very, very good in the military, and he fought with Caesar in Gaul. And during that period, he ends up doing very well in Gaul and becoming a very big name for himself. And when he goes back to Rome to spy on basically what's happening for Caesar, he takes a lot of his military prestige and kind of flaunts it around and gets a lot of influence because of it, okay? But Marcus Antonius was a very good general working for Caesar. In fact, he was in charge of, as tribune, in charge of one or two of the legions that Caesar raised while in Gaul. Okay, those new legions. He was in charge of some of them. Caesar sends letters to these men to suggest the two of them go to the Senate and request an extension on the Gallic governorship for one more year, because Caesar realizes that he wants to extend that governorship in Rome, or in Gaul, just for one extra year, so that he can make sure that the Vercingetorix remnants of that rebellion are completely peaceful. It's been like 2 years since then, and he's putting down a couple tiny, small tribes that are still fighting a little bit, but most of them have been completely defeated. He's building forts throughout all of Gaul, and he wants to just make sure everything is peaceful in Gaul before returning back to Rome. And he kind of wants to do that because he wants to be able to say, I conquered all of Gaul. I brought this huge territory into the Roman Republic. Well, he requests it to the Senate, and the Senate refuses it, after heated debates between Marcus Junius Brutus and Antonius and other allies of Caesar on the popularies that are helping him out for Caesar's name in the Senate. And a bunch of their optimates are saying, no, Caesar needs to come back to Rome and face prosecution for his breaking of the law of when he fought against the Suebi tribe years previous, all the way back to the beginning of this lecture, remember, with the Suebi tribe, in the year, basically, 57. 5 years earlier, or actually 7 years earlier at this point. And so, Caesar, I told you, was going to have that problem with that Suebi tribe, illegal fighting against them, and the Senate has finally turned against him. They were first turning a blind eye, because Pompey was keeping things in check for him, and Crassus as well. But now the optimates want Caesar's head on a platter, not literally, but they kind of do, some of them. And so they are really, really wanting Caesar to return as a private citizen and give up his governorship. And if Caesar has to go back to Rome to discuss this, he would have to do so as a private citizen. He would no longer be the governor or a proconsul of Gaul, and because of this, he could be tried and prosecuted and sent to jail or executed for basically declaring war illegally against the Suebi. And then the Romans in the Senate also put an extra statement saying that if Caesar does not return, because not only is his governorship over, he can't just stay in Gaul. If he wants to stay in Gaul, normally that would be fine. Or going elsewhere, that would be fine. But the Senate then passes a law saying that if Caesar doesn't come back to tell us what happened in Gaul about the Suebi tribe, as well as everything else, then he will be declared as an outlaw if he doesn't return. So if he returns, he's going to be prosecuted for the Suebi tribe, and if he doesn't return, then he's going to be an outlaw anyway. And so Caesar really has to weigh his options here. And his options are return to Gaul as a private citizen and face prosecution, okay, and have only a few allies in the Senate left, such as these two as well as a few others, and probably going to lose that, and then probably go to jail or be executed for declaring war against the Suebi. That's option one, being a private citizen and answering for his crimes. Number two, staying in Gaul or trying to retreat somewhere else, and then being declared as an outlaw for doing that. Or number three, go to Rome at the head of his legions and bring his army with him and tell Rome's Senate, you're not going to prosecute me for these crimes, and if you are, you better raise an army against me because we're going to have a fight. And so he talks with his legions and his legion commanders, and many of them, remember he started with 4, and he's now up to 11, which means he has 7 legions, that he has created from scratch, that he has raised since they were 16, 17 years old, some of them about 18 to 20 years old, depending on when they sign up in the military, and many of them never fought in those 7 other legions at all. Those 7 young legions, 5,000 in each, they have everything to be thanked for Caesar. Anything that they have won from their conquering of Gaul and eventually them having to have their retirement benefits is all thanks to Caesar, or will be thanks to Caesar. No one else is going to help them. And so they owe everything to him. And so many of them decide that they are going to help Caesar if that is going to be the case, that he is going to take option 3. And so in the beginning of the year 49 BCE, on January 10th, 49 BCE, Caesar marches out of Gaul and reaches the border of Italy, which is the Rubicon River, okay? And if he crosses this tiny little river right here, he will be officially entering Italy, okay? The territory of Italy, and then have to march along the roads to Rome. If he crosses that river with soldiers on his side, he is automatically violating Roman law. And he will be the first person to be doing that, violating that law, since Sulla did it. Remember Sulla that became dictator and did it against Rome back then? He would be the first person since Sulla, who Sulla himself really didn't like Caesar, and almost tried to kill Caesar, right? And so Caesar kind of weighs this in. And on January 10th, right before he is about to cross the river on his horse, he says a quote. And the quote is in Greek, not Latin, okay? It is a Greek quote. He actually said it in Greek, not Latin. And the quote is, "E acta alle est." E acta alle est. And it is a quote from the play The Flute Girl by Menander. Menander was the writer of this Greek play, The Flute Girl. And he said it in Greek because he said it in the original way that the play said it. And it translates commonly to, "Let a die be cast," okay? Or that is the actual quote. What it translates directly to is, "Let a die be cast," as in like a die for like Monopoly or a board game or something, like a rolling the die. You have a 1 in 6 chance to winning, okay? Or losing, basically, is his idea. And that's why he says it, is he realizes that by crossing this river with his armies, okay? Because he's got one of his armies, the 13th Legion, with him, okay? When he crosses that river, he's an outlaw, one way or another, if that legion walks with him. And they've told him that they're going to walk with him all the way to Rome if they need to. And he said, yeah, I'm going to need them to, because otherwise I'll be killed. And so he realizes one way or another, he's starting, basically, this gamble. A gamble of, will he survive, will he not? And will this throw Rome into another civil war? And the answer is yes, it's going to be another civil war. It is commonly misquoted, though, okay, even though this is what it actually means right here. It is commonly said that "let the die be cast" or "the die is cast." A lot of people mistranslate this and say it's one of these and misquote it, but it's really "let a die be cast," not "the die," and it's not "the die is cast." Small little issues with translations. The Rubicon River is the provincial border, like I just said. The Legio 13th, the 13th X111 is 13. Gemina, it was called the Gemina Legion. That was its nickname. And he recruited these soldiers in the year 57 BCE. They were the first soldiers he recruited when he got to Gaul, okay, as new soldiers, new young soldiers, recruiting them. They've been fighting with him, and with him in Britain, with him in Germany both times, and Britain both times, for 10 years. They've been fighting with him. They owe him everything. And they realize that they are so loyal that, yes, this is crossing the Rubicon, means plunging Rome into yet another civil war. That violating Roman law about not marching an army into Rome is what he's doing. And they understand that, and they don't care. And they only care that they want him to win. And he realizes that, one way or another, we're now at civil war. And so with that, we will do the Civil War next time.